morning to all you guys at home. Morning to you two as well. Let's get straight into it, shall we? Semenyo to Manchester City. We're expecting it to be formally announced today. Give us the lowdown on the details of this deal. So it was announced last night. I should apologise.
Not been announced yet, so it will be announced today. £64 million is the deal that has been signed. He'll join on a 5.5-year contract, and an official announcement is expected today, and he will be in line to feature for the first time in the FA Cup this weekend. City agreed a deal with Bournemouth outside that release clause of £65 million. City are paying £62.5 million and then an additional £1.5 million in performance-related bonuses, and there's a 10% sell-on clause as well. So in terms of this release clause, the guaranteed part of that release clause was £60 million, but Bournemouth will now receive a slightly higher fee, a guaranteed fee of £62.5 million, which they'll receive over a 24-month instalment. He had a brilliant 3 years at Bournemouth. He ended on a high with that winner against Tottenham earlier on in the week, and now he becomes a Manchester City player. And it's only a matter of time until City confirm their latest signing.
Right, yeah, so he has signed. We will wait for the official confirmation. When that happens, which we anticipate to be soon, where does he fit in to this Manchester City side? He can play all over the front line. Where do you anticipate Pep will use him the most?
And it does feel as if that's the biggest question, because we've been here before with Manchester City. You have an incredible squad, and then you have players arriving, like in the past, Riyad Mahrez, and you think, OK, do they really need this guy? Nice to have, but do they really need him? But, of course, they've put a lot more legs in the front half of the team in the last year or so, and that has had a really positive effect in them. It's pulled them back into the title race. I think the player probably who's under biggest threat from the arrival of Semenyo is probably Omar Mamouche, while he's away at the African Cup of Nations. So obviously Semenyo arrives and has a kind of head start on him. The fact that Mamouche has shown plenty of good bits, but not enough consistent good bits for you to trust him with a starting 11 place all the time. Of course, the order of forward players has really changed with the arrival, particularly of Ryan Shirky. He's been brilliant so far this season, has given a different dimension to Manchester City. Very different sort of player to either Marmoush or Semenyo. But I think if you're looking for direct comparisons, Marmoush is the one. Sort of in that space between like winger and second striker, really. You know, a really direct sort of player who you want, who wants to go directly for goal and run at defenders. So I think that is the medium-term question for City. What happens to Marmoush, especially with Semenyo being in such great form? We've seen in the recent past, so many protracted transfer sagas. You've got a player sitting on his hands, wondering, you know, quite understandably, where am I going next? Maybe feeling he has to force the move by not going to training or whatever. Semenyo's been the absolute opposite. He's just like, right, I'm gonna keep being here, being me, until the moment that you tell me that I'm a Manchester City player. And it's been an exemplary masterclass in how to handle a big money transfer.
It really has, hasn't it? And it's another example of City being decisive in the market. And in fact, we've seen this a lot over the last 12 months. It feels like there's been a real push to get this rebuild done and go again.
It's been such an impressive evolution of the squad. This is slightly different in that City have identified a market opportunity that was there to sign a player of Semenyo's quality for that fee, around £64 million. Plenty of clubs wanted to sign him, and I think in an ideal world, City would have signed him in the summer, but this window represented the opportunity to get him for that money and beat the rest of the competition. And there really has been that evolution. Last January, we saw them spend more than all the Premier League clubs put together to try and fix the holes they had in their squad with injuries to get their season back on track. And there has been a real evolution, because we've seen the likes of Ederson, Kyle Walker, Kevin De Bruyne and Jack Grealish depart, and we expect Bernardo Silva and John Stones to leave in the summer as well. And when you look at what they've done, bringing in the likes of Omar Mamouche, Tajani Reinders has been so impressive in a City shirt already. The whole spine of the team, Donnarumma coming in as well, has completely changed over the course of the last few years as they go again under Pep Guardiola. His long-term future is uncertain, but the future of City does look bright with the business they do and continue to do.
Yeah, I don't know if we can just get that graphic back up there of Manchester City signings over the last 12 months. I want to get Andy's thoughts on all of these. They're quite interesting, aren't they? When you look at them, it's a real mix of youth, and then the odd real experience in there with Donnarumma. But what do you make of their transfer policy over that time?
Well, Donnarumma, I think we have to set apart, Matt. I think the fact is that you're talking about the guy who was perhaps the best goalkeeper in the world in 2025, and also really a market opportunity because his contract was running down and he wasn't going to extend with PSG. But I think it's really nice to see City do that from their perspective, actually, because so many people looked at him in the past and said, this is not a guy who's great with the ball at his feet, so he won't suit Manchester City. And maybe he wouldn't have suited old Manchester City. But of course, they've evolved under Guardiola. Yeah. It's not all about possession now. And they need a goalkeeper primarily who makes saves, because I'm sure we'll come to it later. One of the biggest things they still need to work on is where does their defence go next?
Yes, which we will get on to when we get on to the Marc Guehi chat. But it does seem like it's almost like a different type of player now that they're looking for, Manchester City, than the early Pep Guardiola days.
Yeah, it does. And I think Nico Gonzalez is quite a good example of that. He's really the pivot, the guy who sort of bridges the gap. Because in one way, he's been able to replace Rodri in the medium term, which was a huge issue for them when Rodri picked up that major injury. And, he's never quite got back to his best yet. But I think Nico Gonzalez sort of sits in that mid-space between old City and old Pep, and if you like, a new City and new Pep, because on one hand, he's come out of the Barcelona Academy at La Masia. On the other hand, he's 6'2" and likes to knock players out of the way. So I think he's quite a nice modern balance between where City have been and where City are going, and trying to find this sort of perfect blend in the middle.
Yeah. When we see those figures, £425 million, have they been forced to do that in a lot of ways by what Arsenal have been doing, what Liverpool have been doing, what Manchester United have been doing? Because they're not the only ones who've been spending Manchester City.
You're right, they've wanted to try and stay ahead of the competition. Last season they weren't able to do so for a number of reasons, major injuries being a key part in that. And this season we're still seeing a squad that aren't quite there yet. They are evolving under Pep Guardiola. It is a different type of football from what we've seen. I think they embrace end-to-end games more than they previously did. Previously, Pep Guardiola sides would want to dominate possession. It would be quite careful, their build-up towards scoring goals, but now they're quite embracing play on the counter-attack at time. They've scored more goals on the counter than they have in recent seasons, more fast attacks than we've seen. And actually, as a neutral, they're probably more entertaining to watch because you're not quite sure what you're going to get. But with Arsenal spending so much, with Liverpool spending so much as well, City have had to try to do something because it was an ageing squad. They got the most out of it, winning the treble, winning all those titles, but it did need a refresh. There were players that wanted different challenges as well. As they brought in players with varying levels of experience, ones for the future, some who are ready to come in now, like Tijani Reinders, who's right at the peak of his powers right now. And they will continue to invest where they can. We wait to see if they look to do anything in defence, because clearly that's a real issue for them if they want to do anything special this season. I think they'll be pleased with what happened last night at the Emirates, because it keeps them in the hunt just about, doesn't it? The fact that it isn't that huge gap, which it could have been if Arsenal won yesterday. But with those centre-back issues they have, you wonder if they will try and do something to get themselves out of another hole.
Just a quick one, Andy, before we move on from City. You mentioned Marmoush there, possible question marks over his future now with Semenyo coming in, and also Oscar Bob as well. They've got to decide what they want to do with him.
Yeah, who you feel needs to play, really. I mean, look, there'll be loads of other Premier League clubs interested in it. But I wonder if one to watch this January window are Girona, because they're in real relegation trouble at the bottom of La Liga, having been in the Champions League last season, belong to the City Football Group. I kind of feel by City parking a player or two there, I mean, obviously it serves a short-term problem for City, but it also serves a medium-term problem for them, because even though we've seen it with the relegation of Troyes in France, who are another part of the City Football Group, so maybe it's not the be-all and end-all for them that their satellite clubs stay up. If you're wanting to develop players, you want those teams that are your satellites to be at the highest sort of level that's possible. So they're a team that there won't be a lot of money spent in Spain this January, but Girona are definitely looking at players getting in. Marc-Andre ter Stegen, who's been linked with a move to the Premier League, he's being linked with a move to Girona in this window, which would be a short little hop for him and solve a little problem for Barcelona, with him currently being third choice goalkeeper and wanting to get into the Germany World Cup squad. So I wonder if City helped them out. We know Claudio Echeverri, who didn't have that successful or had an unsuccessful spell at Leverkusen where he didn't really get in the team. He'll probably be going there. I wonder if they'll help them out in a few other ways. And maybe Oscar Bob is one of those.
All right, watch this space on that one. Right, let's get out and about then. Plenty of managers holding news conferences today ahead of the FA Cup this weekend. Eddie Howe will be speaking to the media in the next hour or so, and Keith Downey will be there for us. Morning to you, Keith. Dramatic night that, wasn't it, on Wednesday? Much needed result, much needed win right at the end of a game for a change at St James's Park.
Yeah, look, Matt, you say it was much needed, but actually, if you look at Newcastle's form, particularly in the Premier League, it is on an upward trend at the moment. That's 3 wins in a row. Things beginning to look up. Look, I think if you speak to Eddie Howe, and he's honest, he won't be 100% happy with the performance the other night. Leeds looked very dangerous. They looked like scoring every time they went forward, and I have to say they were very unlucky to leave St James's Park without at least a point. It was one of those games where both teams probably deserved something, but those are the matches that Newcastle need to try and pick up full points in. And look, I don't think it's going to be plain sailing. It's not going to be pretty between now and the end of the season for Newcastle, due to the fact that they're in so many competitions. Of course, we know they're through to the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup. They play Manchester City next week. They've got the FA Cup this weekend. They're still in the Champions League. And of course, they're trying to qualify for Europe again in the Premier League as well. So the games are coming thick and fast for Newcastle. At the moment, Matt, they're in the middle of a spell. 15 games in 50 days. In January alone, they play 9 in 29. It's relentless for them at the moment. So look, I think they are going to have games like that against Leeds the other night, where they probably find it difficult to keep the door closed at the back, but they just need to try and find enough to get over the line. And you have to say, for the players to the energy of the players to keep going like they did the other night against Leeds United, despite the fact that they had a game against Crystal Palace just 3 days earlier, just shows everything about their fitness levels. And I have to say, it was an absolute joy to be there, a privilege to watch that game. One of the best games I've ever seen, certainly at St James's Park. So we'll be hoping for similar tomorrow against Eddie Howe's old club Bournemouth in the FA Cup. Not an easy tie for Newcastle. Remember, they lost to Bournemouth 4-1 at home in the Premier League last season. We know Bournemouth at times can be good on their travel. So tough one for Newcastle in the Cup tomorrow. I think he will ring the changes, and it'll be interesting to hear what he's got to say on Fabian Schär at his news conference this morning. He was stretchered off against Leeds the other night with a bad-looking ankle injury. I understand that the ankle isn't broken, but it sounds like there could be some serious ligament damage. So we'll hear what Eddie Howe has to say on that, and then the come down from that win against Leeds United on Wednesday night, which, as I say, was absolutely amazing. So Eddie Howe's news conference coming up on Sky Sports News at 9:30.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Keith. All right, let's talk about possible transfers then for Newcastle this January. The fans, of course, James, will be desperate for people to come in, but all we hear about Newcastle really these days is about how they can't spend the money that the owners have. So what is the situation in January? Are they still hamstrung? And if so, to what extent? Do they have some money left over from the Isak sale, for example?
They still are restricted, but they're in the best position they've been for a few years when it comes to profit and sustainability. That money coming in from Alexander Isak's sale means they're not in a situation now where they need to sell big players in this window, at least, because there was a real disappointment they felt when they had to sell Elliot Anderson. We know what he's gone on to do. Yankuba Minte as well at Brighton, who Newcastle fans didn't get to see in a Newcastle shirt, but they made big money from him. In this window, they're going to be opportunistic, and they'll look to capitalise on any market opportunities that are there to try and strengthen and bring in players that are summer targets. If the opportunity arises to get these players in for a good fee in January, they'll look to do it. But they've tended to do the majority of their business in recent years in the summer. There's been notable exceptions when they signed Anthony Gordon from Everton, and of course all those years ago when the likes of Kieran Trippier came in that January window and helped them stave off relegation. They're in a very different space right now. Their form has really picked up. But in terms of what we expect them to do in this window, perhaps that defensive area may be one they definitely look at, because with Schär out injured, they are struggling right now for options. We know Kieran Trippier's contract is up in the summer. Lewis Miley's had to play at right back at times this season because Tino Livramento has been out. Lewis Hall has struggled with injury. I think ideally they'd love to get in a defender. It's whether it's worth getting somebody in now, or can they bear with what they have and then go into the summer and really target the players that they really want to sign for the long term.
Was it 3 seasons in a row they've got to Europe, Newcastle, including Champions League, of course. Fans are still a bit impatient, aren't they? Because they're seeing what the resources are of the owners and then frustrated they can't be spent. What do Newcastle need in terms of players, do you think, to get to that next level?
Well, I think as far as the fans go, there's an understanding of what the situation is now. So it's not the same sort of urgency. Of course, there's been a huge amount of pressure lifted by that win in the Carabao Cup. I think in a way that means more than Europe, even if Europe consistently qualifying for the Champions League shows the upward trend of the club and shows the ambitions of the club. For the fans, winning that trophy is such a massive deal. Yeah. So that's really, I think.
And the next level is to be competing for Premier League, Champions League, isn't it? Because Newcastle, they are at that point now, aren't they, where they are consistently in and around top 4 or 5. They've won a trophy. So the next level, how can they get to that next level? It's going to take time.
It's going to take time, and there's an understanding of that. And I think, like James, I think they're in a really good position this window, because what they did last summer, it generally wasn't a sexy window, and obviously it was obviously overshadowed by the Isak thing. But they did the right thing. They improved the squad, and really what they're still doing all these years after the takeover, they're getting rid of the last remnants of the Mike Ashley regime, because there are a lot of players hanging around from that, and there was a big sense of, OK, the first 14, 15 are good, but once you get beyond that, you're a bit short. But I think you look at some of the players who come on, and even say Jacob Ramsey, who's not really hit the heights with Newcastle yet. He's one for this second half of the season, I think. And there are other players like that have managed to contribute a little bit in recent weeks. You know, Aaron Ramsdale was able to come in while Nick Pope was out. And you're still going to get more out of Wissa, who didn't get much of a go in the first half of the season. Voltemada has been great. I think you can expect more from him as well. So I think rather than a sense of we need to go out and get something, there's a sense of Eddie Howe is an exceptional coach who's got a proven track record of improving players. And the more time he spends with these players, the better this squad and this team is going to get.
I don't know about you two, but I'd love a sexy window this January. That would be nice, wouldn't it? It'd be perfect. OK, still to come on Good Morning Transfers. We'll be live to Bournemouth as we look at who may replace Antoine Semenyo. Plus, we'll be assessing Arsenal's potential transfer business. Stay with us. eye of the round as well as they go to Old Trafford. Let's go live to their training ground right now and speak to Elliot Cook. Morning to you, Elliot. Now, Brighton have moved fast, haven't they, to bring back a fan favourite already in the window. But could Fabian Hürzeler be looking to strengthen elsewhere this month?
That's right, Matt. Brighton fans and Brighton management, Brighton squad, all very happy with the return of Pascal Gross. Signed a week ago today. Pascal Gross returning to the club for a fee of around £1.2 million. He made his debut without a training session, coming on as a substitute in the second half in the win against Burnley, and was very influential. His first start on his second spell at the club against Manchester City at the Etihad on Wednesday night, where he scored. He almost scored inside the first couple of minutes. A great cross from the left-hand side from Diego Gomez, pulling him out. But Pascal Gross couldn't quite get enough purchase on the header, and in the end, Donnarumma made the save. But it just brings that extra experience, a bit of control into that Brighton midfield, and he's very, very good for the youngsters in terms of passing on his experience, his expertise. In terms of other signings, well, look, as we know, Tony Bloom doesn't like doing business in January. He sees the summer as the time where Brighton will spend money. It's not a great market in January for Brighton. It's difficult to really get the players that they really want, and in terms of value and price. What they do look to do in January, Brighton, is to perhaps look at one or two prospects, talent for the future, development signings, if you like, players that perhaps they can bring into the building and then perhaps go on loan, develop their footballing education and get them ready for the first team squad.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Elliot. Right, well, as Elliot says there, he is a fan favourite at Brighton, isn't he, Gross? I think he was the first signing of the Premier League era, actually.
Under Chris Hughton, yeah, 2017.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the reasons why he is 34 years old. Why didn't it work out for him at Dortmund?
Well, it kind of half did and half didn't, really, because that first season, 15 assists, which is really good, but he's signed under a different coach, Nuri Sahin. The coach now, Niko Kovac, he's someone who believes quite passionately in physically beasting his players, and Gross can't do that at 34. He was never the quickest getting up and down anyway. And if you look at the signing of Joe Bellingham, for example, that is where Dortmund are going. They want to be a more physical, mobile midfield. And for that reason, Pascal Gross has struggled to get minutes and struggled to really influence the team when he's been in the team this season. I mean, in that sense, it feels a bit weird at 34 going back to the Premier League when you're struggling a little bit with the physical demands of a coach in the Bundesliga. But I guess, as Elliot was saying, it's about the experience, it's about what he can pass on. It's not really about him playing every game. Dortmund get to not pay his wages for the next 6 months. Of course, he was running out of contract as well. So I think it works for everyone.
Yeah, it's an interesting model they've got at Brighton, isn't it? They've got the youth, but they've also got some real veterans in there. So, it's quite different from Chelsea, where it's just all youth, for example. Right, OK, let's just pop over to Bournemouth now, because they face Newcastle tomorrow in the FA Cup. Another big game between two Premier League sides. Mark McAdam is at the club's training ground for us. Good morning, Mr. McAdam. We were discussing it earlier. Weren't we? Oh, where is he? He's inside. Lucky man. We're discussing earlier, how did Bournemouth replace Antoine Semenyo then? Do they have a player lined up?
How do you replace the irreplaceable? Yeah, this is what Bournemouth fans will be waking up to this morning, just waiting for official confirmation from both Manchester City and Bournemouth that finally Antoine Semenyo, we've been talking about it for weeks and weeks, is finally a Manchester City player. I'm expecting that news to come through at some stage this morning ahead of Andoni Iraiola's press conference. As you can see, I'm just relaxing at the training ground at the moment. The facilities are fantastic here, over £40 million worth of investment, and they put a nice sofa in the corner of the press room as well. Just take a look. I am actually in the press room. I am actually doing some work, so don't worry. It's not just me lazing around with a cup of tea this morning. But what they've got to try and do now is start life without Antoine Semenyo, who is the third top goal scorer in the Premier League. 10 goals for Bournemouth, 3 assists. He's been the standout player. He's absolutely exceptional, hence why he's got this £64 million move to Manchester City. Bournemouth's replacements list is in full flow. They've been linked with so many players already over the course of this window, but as of yet, they've not got close to signing anyone, and I don't think they're going to get close to signing anyone this side of the weekend. We know that they are looking to replace Antoine Semenyo. We know that they have already made a signing in this January window, the goalkeeper Fraser Forster, so they have added a little bit of strength in depth, but it's the out wide that Bournemouth fans are most concerned about. And how do you replace someone with 13 goal involvements? It's going to be tricky. Andy Brassel knows very well the European market. He knows the players that are out there at the moment. They went for Amin Adli over the course of the summer for Bayer Leverkusen, but he hasn't yet really hit the heights that they were expecting. And they do have someone called Eli Krupi Jr., who's only got 7 Premier League goals, but he's had a huge impact. He's only 19 years old as well, so maybe he'll get a little bit more game time alongside Eva Nilsson. But I am expecting Bournemouth to try and sign some players over the course of this January. They do have to be conscious about PSR and squad cost ratio finances for next season. So they have to be clever, they have to be astute, they have to make sure they get these signings right. So it's going to be fascinating. But I do think it could be a busy sort of winter window down here on the South Coast. But they are going to have to be conscious of where they spend their money. We'll be speaking to Andoni Iraola. We'll get his thoughts and find out if there is any developments on their replacement for Antoine Semenyo. We'll find out the very latest injury news. They were hit with a big blow this week when Justin Kluivert had an operation, so he's going to be out for some time as well. And they are a little bit thin on the ground, so I'm expecting it to be busy down here. And as you can see, I won't sit there for the press conference. I'll get up, I'll take my seat over there, and this is where Andoni Iraola will be speaking to the media later on. We'll get all the latest news and find out exactly his thoughts ahead of the FA Cup weekend against Newcastle and Eddie Howe this weekend, and hopefully we'll get a couple of little bits on transfers as well.
See, that's how you should do a live before your press conference. Sitting on a sofa, inside, in the warmth. McAdam, he's got the right idea. Thanks very much, mate. You know what, though? He was holding that cup all the way through, and I was just waiting for him to reveal an Arsenal logo. And it just never came. I was like, surely he's going to be an Arsenal.
Southampton.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll get on to, he said quite rightly there, you obviously know Europe very well and potential options for Bournemouth. But before that, James, is it a big worry in general for Bournemouth, right? If you keep selling your biggest players, and they will have sold four in the last 2 windows, with Semenyo going as well, eventually that is going to catch up with you because you can't keep finding these little gems in the market in terms of players you're bringing in, or can you?
Well, that's what they have done, and that's what they continue to do. The likes of Bournemouth and Brentford have thrived in the Premier League with this model where you think, how on earth can they survive losing the players they have? And that was the worry last summer when the whole backline was pretty much decimated when it came to departures, but they started the season so well, didn't they? They're up to second. They had their best ever start to a Premier League campaign, but then things did tail off. That win against Spurs was their first in 11 in the Premier League. There will be that concern there, but as Mark said, they are very conscious of fitting in with the PSR rules, and the squad cost ratio rules next year will really affect a club like Bournemouth because they don't create a huge amount of revenue because it is a very small stadium. Commercially, they're not a huge club, so they do really have to be very conscious. Of course, Andoni Iraola's future is unclear. His contract expires in the summer. There's no indication yet as to what he'll do in the summer, but they continue to find players that get them into a position where they continue to stay in the Premier League and continue to be a big
But there are
threat
plenty
in
of
the Premier
clubs
League.
that has happened to. You know, Wolves, for example. Wolves kept selling their big-name players. When Nuno was there, the likes of Diogo Jota, Ruben Neves, etc., leading on down to Cunha and Aït-Nouri, and then eventually it catches up with you. You can't keep replacing these people.
That is true, but when that sort of money comes in for these players who they're buying for such a small amount of money, Semenyo, for instance, cost around £9 million from Bristol City 3 years ago. I think some fans will feel that Antoine Semenyo is worth more than £65 million, but they only were able to get him to sign a new contract with that release clause there, which, of course, City activated. In the end, they didn't activate it. They spent slightly more than the release clause for favourable terms for Bournemouth. But ultimately, every club outside the top 6 are selling clubs. This is the model it has to be like because they buy these players in, and also they wouldn't be able to get certain players like when they got Dean Howson in, when they signed Zabani. The allure of going to a club like Bournemouth is you'll get first-team opportunities, play in the Premier League. This will be an opportunity for you to thrive. But if you do thrive and big clubs come in, then we will sell you. You don't want to be a club that holds on to these players against their wishes, because then in the future you're not going to get more Antoine Semenyos or Dean Howson. So that's the model that Bournemouth have. Yes, it is risky, but it's the way they're operating it, and so far it's been successful for them.
And we have to say their recruitment has been much better than Wolves, if we're talking about in terms
without
of
a doubt.
replacements as well. But as James was saying, Houghton is sold it. They're almost taking him on loan, really, aren't they? You know he's not really there permanently. He's there to be flipped to a bigger club at a later point.
OK, all right, maybe at a later date we'll delve into who potentially could come in. Maybe they'll wait until the summer. You never know, Bournemouth, for that replacement for Antoine Semenyo. Right, bit of news from the Championship to bring you. West Brom are progressing in their negotiations with Eric Ramsey to become their new head coach. It's unlikely he'll be in place for Sunday's FA Cup clash with Swansea, though. So Eric Ramsey progressing, possibly going to be taking over at West Brom. On the way for us, who will Marc Guehi be playing for next? We'll discuss that shortly. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Now, John Cross from the Mirror reported last night that Arsenal are ready to enter the race to sign the Crystal Palace defender, Marc Guehi. Our understanding is that he is a player that they have held a long-term interest in as well. interesting, this, isn't it, James? I mean, look, Arsenal are rock solid defensively. They've got a number of defenders who can play centre-back and a very established, clear number one, number two pairing. Can you really see them going in for another A-list defender?
In this window, it seems unlikely, but as we've been reporting, there's been a long-standing interest from the likes of Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester City, all the big clubs like Barcelona, Bayern Munich and Real Madrid have a long-term interest in signing Marc Guehi, and the majority want to sign him as a free agent in the summer. The question is, in this window, will anybody attempt to try to sign him now? Because we know that Crystal Palace would be willing to do business if a suitable offer came in, because I think they're desperate not to let him go for free, albeit they see the benefits of what Marc Guehi staying until the end of the season can do in terms of what they're able to do, in terms of the Premier League finish, in terms of winning a trophy again, and what that could do financially for the club, and what that could do, therefore, in terms of recruiting players next summer. Let's look at the options that Arsenal have right now at centre-back. They've got Gabriel and Saliba, arguably the best centre-back pairing in the Premier League. Behind them, they've got Mosquera and Nketiah. They've also got Timber and Ben White, who were signed as centre-backs as well, who largely play on the right side now. And Calafiori can play as centre-back and at left-back. They have so many options there right now. I think what it would say is if Arsenal were to strongly pursue Marc Guehi either in January or the summer, then I think it would raise questions about the future of some of these 7 players. A lot of them have long-term contracts, but that would raise questions, because one thing Arsenal have done, and they've been criticised for it, but they've been vindicated by it, is they've tried to replace players whilst they're in a strong position. They replaced Aaron Ramsdale, who was doing well, with David Raya. That's worked out. Every area of the pitch, it's felt like they've been fine in that position, but they've strengthened and it's made them stronger. So maybe this is another situation where they want to create even more competition. That feels like, can you create even more competition in that centre-back area without spreading rumours or creating false narratives? If they're signing Marc Guehi, then you'd think one of those senior players could be potentially on the way out.
OK, well, yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? But when you look at Manchester City's defensive options in comparison, is it very clear which side needs Marc Guehi the most?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And I guess that's why this has come to the fore again in recent days, because you look at the absences at the moment of Dias, of Gvardiol, the fact that John Stones, you never quite know where you are fitness-wise. Kuzanov has struggled to prove himself of the appropriate level so far, even though he's one for the future, I would argue. And then you've got the recall for Max Alleyne, who's done very, very well at Watford. But we're talking about a massive step up. Yeah. Him coming from the Championship into the middle of a Premier League title race.
And we've got Nico Gonzalez on there because Pep said he might have to play him at centre-back the other day.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's clear where they are. It's good that Nathan Ake didn't accept that move to West Ham on loan, I suppose, at least for the moment. So it's clear who Marc Guehi is worth the most to in this month. City have got an opportunity. They've got to go in all guns blazing in terms of fee and in terms of wages to make it irresistible to
Well,
to
35
club and
million
player.
was the number in the summer. Do you think Man City might even have to offer that same again?
Maybe more.
More?
Maybe more.
More than in the summer?
Yeah, because Palace know exactly how much Manchester City need him at the moment. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Part of the Arsenal interest, or the acceleration of the Arsenal interest, must be dictated by, can we let City get him? I mean, as James says, I think you look at that list of centre-backs and you think, how much longer will Ben White be there, for example? Has Nketiah impressed enough to have a long-term future there, even though he's had some really, really good moments in the last month or two? But part of it has to be, we have got this golden opportunity to win the Premier League and let's get ahead of them.
How about in Europe as well? Because we've often heard that big clubs in Europe have been interested in Marc Guehi, the likes of Real Madrid. Bayern Munich, a name that keeps coming up. If we look at Bayern's defensive options, where does Marc Guehi fit into that if he comes in? Is he a definite starter?
Well, I would have said yes if we're going back a month. But I think the other thing that we've got to bear in mind in this transfer window is unexpected extensions. Now, Mike Maignan, for example, who was very close to going to Chelsea last summer, is re-signing at Milan, so he's not going anywhere this month. And the key one when we're talking about Guehi and Bayern is Dayot Upamecano. And if we go back to September, October, they're miles apart on wages, Bayern and Upamecano. Now they're really close. He's really close to signing again. And this makes a massive difference. Like, they don't feel that Guehi is going to be a priority target for them, I don't think. I think other clubs are going to be ahead of them in a queue because they've committed so much money on Upamecano. So another free transfer signing, even if he's still a very attractive option, it feels to me like Real Madrid will be a little bit more keen to go further for him. But look, I think this gives City an opportunity, really. And, you know, I think we have to look at that, because the front half of the team, you talked about all the reconstruction that City have done in the last year plus. The front half of the team looks great. The back half of the team, even when everyone's fit, because will Kuzanov ever get there? How fit will John Stones ever be? Is Ruben Dias the player he was 18 months, 2 years ago? These are all valid questions. So I think for all those reasons, for not just the short term, but for the medium and long term, it's the bit of the team that City really have to be looking at next if they're going to dominate in the Premier League again. And that's why Guehi is absolutely vital for them, and why I think they will be pushed to spend a bit more if Guehi will accept the move.
From Guehi's point of view, though, are there a lot more advantages for him if he waits until the summer than moving in January?
It feels that way, and it's World Cup year as well. He doesn't want to be destabilised at this point in the season where he is pretty much England's first choice centre-back. He doesn't want to do anything to jeopardise that. He's very happy at Crystal Palace. He owes a lot to Crystal Palace. He respects the club. The club respect him. He's gone from being an outsider at Chelsea, a promising young player, to being established as one of the best Premier League defenders at Crystal Palace. And for him right now, I don't think it makes a huge amount of sense for him to move. There's still plenty he can achieve at Palace in the second half of this season, and in the summer he'll get the opportunity to get the World Cup out of the way, hopefully be victorious with England, and then get his choice of any club he wants to join potentially. He'll be in a much better position to decide his own destiny rather than a club coming in now and him making a decision on that said club, whereby in the summer he'll get plenty of opportunities. There is the other argument, the slightly cynical argument of he could pick up a significant injury and then this summer be in a different position than what we think he'll be in. But I think for the player now, he should wait, bide his time, enjoy the last few months at Crystal Palace, guide them to more silverware, there's hope, and be in a great position in the summer to do whatever he wants to do, because he deserves it. He's an absolutely brilliant player. I think he could play anywhere on the pitch. He's that good.
Yeah. In a word, Andy, where will Marc Guehi be at the start of next season? Which club?
Oh, this is tough. Maybe Liverpool.
Liverpool, OK.
Maybe right. Liverpool. I agree with James. I think he'll go on the free this summer. OK, right. Still to come, injury issues at Tottenham Hotspur and pressure mounting on Thomas Frank. We'll look at Spurs and what they may do in the market this January. Stay with us.
We're looking back on this day 5 years ago, where Charlie Austin even made the return to QPR on loan from West Brom. Austin's 8 goals in 19 starts helped move QPR up from 19th to secure a 9th place finish in the Championship table, and he went on to make that a permanent deal in the summer. Right, let's discuss Spurs then, shall we? Not going to plan at the moment for Thomas Frank, who's under increasing pressure, and he's not being helped by injuries. We're hearing Mohamed Kudus could be out until around about April. Brennan Johnson's been sold to Crystal Palace. Dejan Kulusevski, there's been a slight issue with him as well, hasn't there? Is this all of a sudden looking like quite a crucial January window for Thomas Frank?
It is. Things feel really desperate right now for Tottenham. That trust between the fan base and the club isn't there right now. They've got no faith in the club getting back on track. And let's bear in mind, just over 6 months ago, they won their first trophy in 17 years. But Thomas Frank spoke yesterday. He said the club are working really hard to try to improve the squad, but admits that it's a very difficult window. This is the first transfer window since Daniel Levy departed the football club, and part of the restructuring at the leadership level was to set the club up for long-term sporting success. But early on in this transfer window, it doesn't look like there's going to be any major moves made by Tottenham. It is a very difficult window for them to do anything significant. But no Kulusevski, Solanke or Maddison. They haven't started a match under Thomas Frank. Bergvall and Bentancur have injuries. Sarr is still at AFCON. There's no natural right winger now because they've sold Brennan Johnson, albeit that was good business for £35 million. But to sell Johnson and not have a replacement lined up does feel pretty amateur, I'd say.
Right, OK. Frank confirmed as well that Christian Romero will remain as captain. There was this social media post, where he perhaps called out those above him and said that they sometimes go a bit missing when times are hard. And he's had a few issues, hasn't he, with discipline and various other things. He's been linked with Atletico in the past, Christian Romero. Do you see his long-term future at Tottenham?
I think maybe, but by default, I would say, because I guess he's worth more to Spurs than he's worth to anyone else. If you look at him, like his international teammates consider him one of the best, if not the best centre-back in the world. I'm not sure that quite corresponds to the reality, excellent as he is. And I just wonder which elite team is going to go all the way for him. So you have these moments where he calls out the Spurs hierarchy, and at any other club you think, OK, this paves the way to a move. But what they want for him and what anyone else is willing to pay are two different things. Now, look, the price that Spurs have had on Christian Romero was always unrealistic to imagine Atletico paying that, even if he's a player you could see fitting really well with Diego Simeone. But they've invested very heavily the last 2 summers, and of course, in the last couple of months, they've been taken over. So they should have even more money to spend in the future. So if not this January, which I think is a very complicated deal to put together in January, maybe summer, depending where Spurs are.
Just want to finish on a quick Chelsea chat. You know Liam Rosenior very well from his time as Strasbourg head coach in Ligue 1. He's about to take charge of his first game as the Chelsea head coach. First of all, do you think he might bring any players with him from Strasbourg?
Yeah, I think straight away, Valentin Barco, who wouldn't have gone to Ligue 1, definitely wouldn't have gone to Strasbourg without him. I think he's definitely one that he's keen on. It's quite interesting how Ruben Amorim, when he left Sporting for Manchester United, made it pretty clear that he would be respecting the club by not bringing any players with him in that first season. Rosenior's not said anything like that. Now, of course, it's slightly different because of the shared ownership. But Barco is a player who is not just someone who Rosenior really likes and considers really vital, but he's also a player who underlines what a good coach Rosenior is and why he's been chosen for the Chelsea job. Of course, when there is a left-back of some promise, and now he's been turned into this sort of inside left midfielder, really thrived there. He's happy to be reunited with Andre Santos as well.
We've got about 20 seconds. What kind of football can Chelsea fans expect from Rosenior?
Vibrant, physical, pretty fast, though they had a bad end to their spell under Liam Rosenior. Only 9 points in the last 10 league games. So that's the sort of run that would get you sacked at Chelsea. So he needs to get himself together as well as getting used to his new players.
He might have some slightly better tools to work with at
Yes.
Chelsea, I would imagine. Andy, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Adding a bit of class, as I said. And you as well, James. You always do. Right, me and James will be back at midday for transfer talk. We've also got Ref Watch coming up in a few minutes and might be getting some news on Antoine Semenyo's contract imminently.